Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be talking to you today. Today, we are going to be talking about how Mitt Romney, of all people, instigated the chain of events that led to the political realignment of America. And then from there, the political realignment of the right and the left across many countries around the world. And that in a way, his candidacy birthed the new right. Now, I note it did not come from support of his candidacy. It actually came from a faction of the right that was disappointed with his loss and where the party had gone, but he also opened doors that really changed a number of things.
So inadvertently, he loosened the lid on the tight jar of the new right.
Yes.
Exciting.
And
I love this theory.
And I want to discuss this in the context of a friend of ours who works for the Heritage Foundation, Emma Waters, did a tweet chain recently saying that people who do things like us that want to improve intergenerationally, because right now, let's be honest, we're talking about like polygenic selection, which, we do, Elon's does, like a lot of the tech elite do.
But what Emma Waters is criticizing more broadly, because it's not just polygenic risk selection, is this concept of designer babies, which we are totally for. We're like, yes, designer babies. Yes, CRISPR editing. Yes, like all of the things. We are 100% into that. And I don't want people to misconstrue it. Yes, of course, right now we're choosing birth order largely based on cancer risk to buy time for cures for our kids who have higher cancer risk. That doesn't mean that when we get the chance to...
Yeah, well, and I think that the polygenic risk conversation occludes the morality of the larger conversation, because there you're focused more on not using all of the embryos, when the real question at hand was in the next 20 to 30 years.
Should we be genetically modifying humans? Yeah, and that is... It's such an important conversation. And I texted Emma when she posted it, when I saw it, that I was just so glad that she's bringing this debate up, because it's not discussed enough. And what we're heading toward, because this is what's happening at scientific conferences. I was just checking in on this recently. Is people are just like, this is unethical. Let's just not do it. Let's just not do it. And it's stifling research. It's stifling development. And what I want instead are very productive discussions of, okay, why? Why exactly is this so bad?
Well, what's interesting here is a lot of the pushback against it is coming from the left. The vast minority of the pushback against it is coming from the left.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we've really seen a right-leaning mainstream individual who we've been working with like do this level of pushback. And one of the things that we pointed out.
Well, and it's very explicit. I want to point out that from the moment we first met Emma Waters, which was at the first NatalCon 2 years ago, her whole stance was, IVF is not good. Any sort of reprotech is something that should be avoided at all cost. And really what we need to do is get at the root causes of fertility, that we don't want to move toward these abominations of reprotech. And instead we want to find natural, let's go back to tracking our cycles, getting to know our bodies, not taking birth control, avoiding endogenous irritants or pollutants that harm fertility, which is a very legitimate stance. But what we don't agree with is that like, oh, but you can't or shouldn't do these other things.
No, that's not even what we disagree with. What we disagree with is it makes sense to split this political allegiance over, or alliance that's been building over this issue. And that is what she suggested doing in her chain of tweets.
Yeah,
she said, we cannot have a pronatalist movement with people who use this type of technology.
Yeah, she's like, good pronatalists don't do designer babies, which
is a bigger problem, because what she's essentially saying as she says that is we cannot have the tech right new right alliance,
which is damaging.
We cannot have the tech right MAGA alliance, which is crippling going forwards if we take this stance for the right being able to win. So just to explain that before we get into the whole Romney chain here, the areas where we differ with people like her are incredibly small in terms of what could actually pass in policy. So if you're like, okay, what are your guys like, and when I say small, I mean like 2% maybe we have policy differences, which I think surprises a lot of people, but because they haven't thought through, it's like, well, you two have radically different views on the world, but where your views differentiate, neither of you could actually win any legislation. So it doesn't make sense to split up alliances based on those differentiations.
Exactly.
So An example of this would be, is we would campaign for stricter access to abortion, earlier laws around abortion. She would campaign for stricter access to abortion, earlier laws around abortion, right? In her perfect world, it wouldn't happen at all, and it would be completely illegal. And in ours, it wouldn't be, except that'll never pass in the United States, right? So it doesn't make sense to split the alliance over this because it's not something that can pass. Or in her perfect world, you might end up outlawing IVF, but outlawing IVF would destroy the Republican Party's base. Like, it is not a popular idea. Or in certain factions, I don't think that this is her views, but in certain factions of this split, some people are like against gays and gay marriage, right? Like, they're like, no gay marriage in the United States. And it's like, fine, I would disagree with that, but it's not worth splitting the alliance on, because you couldn't even win among only Republican voters if you were anti-gay marriage in the United States.
Yeah.
That's how silly that is. Or at least it would be close. And so there's these areas where we have these differential perspectives, but it is really important that we don't do what the wokes do, that we don't do what the Democrats do and say, okay, yeah, you're different on any one issue, like J.K. Rowling, different on just one issue. Let's kick her out of the party, and villainize her and say that we can't work with her. We work as a coalition because we're being practical about actually getting stuff done. And if you look at what the White House is doing right now, they are achieving things that Republicans have wanted to achieve for the past 2 decades, in an amazing rate. And it's the tech bros who are doing it, because they're not, I don't want to say deep state bureaucrats, but what I will say is that if you are pulling from entrenched political players, you are going to get people, whether they are Democrat or Republican in their leanings, that have deep connections to the deep state and therefore have deep connections in the status quo not changing. And that's one reason why this alliance has been so fruitful at the level of implementation. But so we'll get to like what the alliance means, what the alliance's goals are. But I wanted to start here by being like, please, the Democrats are constantly trying to break us up. They're constantly trying to get Trump and Elon to fight. They're constantly trying to, when one of us succumbs to that, instead of being like, and this is why this tweet got to me, because it didn't say, these two, I disagree with them, let's talk about the philosophy on this, or tech right people, not specifically calling them out, like, I disagree. It said they are not pro-natalists. And if we are not pro-natalists, then we are not part of the new right coalition. And that's a big problem. And we have been, and the tech right, I would say, within this coalition has been incredibly charitable to the Heritage Foundation. They have taken over the IVF, like the pro-IVF bills.
Well, sorry, to follow up, the first strictly prenatalist executive order released was basically one promising to figure out how to reduce the cost of IVF in the United States. Heritage is one of the leading contingents advising the White House on how to reduce those costs, but they're only doing it by, well, the best form of IVF is no IVF. Isn't that so much less expensive? It's $0 to IVF. Here's how we do it, which again is totally in line with their philosophy, but not actually addressing what was promised.
Yeah, and there is easy things that could be done. I'm going to just call it, so like the licensing agency for embryologists only licensed 80 a year. It's one of those like artificially created monopolies to increase their salary.
Like De Beers, someone described it to us. Which is that's insane. That is a very low hanging fruit, and yet
very easy to fix. But of course, they wouldn't think to look at things like that because, and we haven't put up a stink about this, right? Like we're like, okay, this is the terms of the alliance. You guys don't come for IVF. You can, restrict it or not make it cheaper in the ways you want to in working with the administration. But, and none of the other like pro IVF, pro embryo, like selection parts of the tech right have come at the White House for choosing the Heritage Foundation to be the ones to execute on this. Like, I know that like we have been incredibly gracious in terms of our role within this, and we want to make sure that nobody pushes anyone else off the table. When we, for example, have said things critical of Lyman Stone, a lot of that for us was driven by him attacking other people who wanted to be a part of the coalition, who came out saying, I'm a pronatalist. And he's like, oh, well, I disagree with you here. And it's like, look, if somebody's new in the movement, we need to do what we can to raise their status, or a new convert, and not belittle them, because that's how we create this harmonious alliance that doesn't become what the wokes became.
Yeah, even if we disagree with their policies, it's important to be a Big Tent movement. So, I mean, I get that, you know, Lyman is a very passionate person, and it's in his personality to criticize things that he doesn't agree with. And I get that, but we're really trying to be a Big Tent movement. And if people feel like they're being shoved out or this is being fractured, we all lose power. We all lose the ability to raise awareness about this and do something.
Yes, and do something about our many shared goals, whether it's, you know, education reform, making abortion less common, you know, it's strengthening America and ensuring that we are a powerful country. And in the argument, I argued with her because her whole thing was against like genetically modifying humans. It's like a fundamentally like an un-American thing. And what I pointed out is, you know, if we don't do this in America, somebody else is going to do it. And eventually, within a few generations, you know, your children are going to be under the jackboot of Chinese super soldiers. When we tell the left, we're like, hey guys, if you don't have kids, you're not going to exist in the future. And they re at us, you know, they're reeing, but it's obviously true what we're saying. If we tell people on the right, if you deny technologies that allow for intergenerational improvement in human capacity, whether it is genetic augmentation or human AI integration and stuff like that, BCI, that's where I started my career, was in brain computer interface. Eventually, groups that are engaging with these technologies are going to be able to exert power over you, so long as they actually do increase their capacity. And if they don't increase their capacity, then people are going to stop engaging with them. So what are you fighting over, right? Mm-hmm. So you're essentially ensuring the death of the American empire, and anyone who might be able to protect your right to not use technologies like this, to stay granola. Whereas we, the tech right, have a philosophy of, we want to have the choice to engage with reproductive technologies we engage with, and the human, you know, AI stuff we engage with, but we don't want that to ever be forced on anyone else. We want everyone to have the right to make these decisions for themselves. And as I pointed out, you know, this is not like the idea of human augmentation and advancement is not anti-America. The avatar of patriotism in America is Captain America. Captain America is a human who was augmented by scientists to be better. We didn't hate the Nazis because they were trying to make people healthier or better. We hated the Nazis because they were forcing other people into coercive fertility decisions, whether it was having more kids than they would have, or having less kids than they would have, or how they were having kids. And that's the position you're taking when you try to restrict our access to this sort of technology. And it's a fundamentally Nazi-esque and un-American position, because America is a country that is defined by alternate cultural hypotheses competing, but in an environment where the one thing we all agree on is you won't force your way of life on us, and we won't force our way of life on you, so that we can protect each other's ways of life. And I think that this is where the old right really sort of makes mistakes, because they think about the country in a context where they had enough of votes with their broadly agreed upon Judeo-Christian traditionalist value set to win national elections and then enforce those values on the population, where they just don't have that anymore. If you want to protect traditional 1950s Americanaism, the left, which has the dominant power, the urban monoculture, which has the dominant power, they won't elect you into office. You protect that by aligning yourself with other people who are running cultural experiments that are also alternate to the left.
Yeah.
But let's get into the Mitt Romney thing, because this is really interesting to me.
Interesting. Yeah. I want to see your argument for this. I'm not sure. I'm like, I don't see how it could be. Because I at first I thought, well, you're going to say it's because he was Mormon and that made him different from this sort of evangelical Protestant base that was GOP Inc. But we had previously elected Catholics. Yes, they were Democrats, but like
no, hold on. You are glossing over this. The Republican Party in its entire history has never had a Catholic frontrunner, even till today, for presidential office. In fact, they've never had a non-Protestant other than Mitt Romney.
Yeah, making JD Vance quite notable, actually. But yeah, so let's go into Romney. I want to hear your take here.
Into Romney. Before this, the alliance, the Judeo-Christian alliance, had sort of looked at where the shadows of the various Christian denominations overlap and said, this is the culture we want to enforce upon the United States and its citizens through laws, through the way we govern, through the way the state operates.
Okay.
And this created a winning coalition for a long time. And the backbone of that coalition was evangelicals. Catholics were mostly, even today, Catholics vote majority Democrat, and historically they were far Democrat. And if you want to understand why, it was because the mainstream American system, like what the KKK was trying to protect against, is it was blacks, Jews, and Catholics. Those were the groups that they lynched. And I remember I mentioned this in the previous essay code, and somebody's like, wait, the KKK was predominantly interested in Catholics as much as black people? And I'm like, yes. Jews were a bit of an afterthought for them, but it was like blacks and the Catholics. These were the two primary un-American forces that they were intent on stamping out. When RFK became a nominee for president, many people freaked out because they were like, well, isn't he going to be loyal to the Pope and not to the American people?
Yeah, yes.
And look, it's
that's like electing a woman and being like, well, but isn't she going to be loyal to her husband?
Right. Well, I mean, and people asked this about Mitt Romney. Isn't he going to be loyal to the Mormon church over the American people? And this is a viable question to ask, right? Like, historically speaking, if you're creating this alliance of different Christian denominations, but you're like, but, what we say it's like Judeo-Christian values, what we mean is Protestant values and traditionalist American Protestant values.
Right. Yeah.
And then Mitt Romney comes in. And he increasingly runs and increasingly normalizes. When he first started running, everyone was horrified that he was Mormon.
Yeah, how can there be this Mormon freak president? But also he looks so like many Mormons, so clean cut, corporate, friendly, spotless.
And this is part of what created the new right. So we'll get to this. So Mitt Romney comes into office. And he not office, but he comes into like the dominant position was in the American Republican coalition.
Right.
And largely by the time he does, most of the evangelicals had actually gotten okay with him. If you're looking at white evangelicals, 62% strongly favored Romney, only 28% had reservations, and only 9% were only voting for him as a rejection of Obama.
Wow.
So that, and consider that of Mormons, 2% were primarily voting for him out of a rejection of Obama. So they were only like 3 times more than that, right? And Mormons' view of the metaphysical nature of the world is quite different from the traditional Christian view. And what was interesting is he captured wholesomeness and a wholesome family and a like teetotaler, like doing everything the correct way lifestyle, much more than the other Protestant groups were doing, as Mormons have for a while. And so the idea, and this has happened to me a number of times, was in if you go to modern conservative spaces online, you're going to get people talking about figures like John Vervanke or Jordan Peterson. And these are individuals who are definitely not Christian in a normal context, but nobody would see them as antagonistic to the modern conservative cause. If you look at people like us with our weird techno-Puritan beliefs, I mean, we are 100% Christians from our perspective because we base our religion off of the Bible and really straight. Like if you go to our tract series, we may have a lot of heretical beliefs, but they come from alternate readings of lines from the Bible, right? And so I will engage with Christians often in the New Right Coalition, and I will drop with them. I'll be like, well, I'm a Christian, but probably not in a way that you would really accept. Like we've had Redeemed Zoomer on our show and stuff like that. And I drop things that I think they're going to be like, no, I hate you. And they're like, no, I have some friends in this church that believe that, or I have some for, that's not really so bad. That's not really so bad. And it feels a bit like that scene from Some Like It Hot, where I'm like, actually, maybe like, I mean, I know that there's some areas where they're like, okay, that is definitely heretical. Like that our version of Christianity does not believe, if you watch our last tract, that Jesus Christ claim to literally be God's son. We point out that in the Old Testament, people said, I'm God's son all the time. Even today, people are like, they call God the Father. They don't mean he's literally their father. To give more color here, what is written in the Bible is that God impregnated Mary using Joseph's DNA. We know he used Joseph's DNA because if he didn't, then Jesus wouldn't be the Messiah, because the Messiah had to be patrilineally descended from the house of David. And that makes God's role closer to an IVF doctor's role. And yet no one would say that an IVF doctor is the father of my kids, even though all my kids were conceived through IVF. Nor do we describe God to be the literal father of other children he helps to miraculously conceive throughout the Old and New Testament. And so we go through all the stuff in that tract. If you want to get into like why we have this heretical understanding, but it's in part because we believe that it's what the text is actually arguing when you go and read the text in context. But that's like a super heretical belief that I expected would have us pushed far more out of Christian circles or far less accepted. And I think and people can look at us and be like, wow, that's really heretical, but it's not as heretical as Jordan Peterson, who just doesn't accept the Christian faith at all. It's not as heretical as John Vervaeke, who's like, well, Christianity is good, but more as like a set of like metaphysical stories and stuff like that. You know, they're seen as very like inoffensive within this movement. So in a way, the ways that we're offensive is because we actually like deeply believe the text in a way that these other individuals don't. So they're like, okay, maybe they'll be brought over. But the point I'm making here is this allowed for this broader coalition to build? And what was interesting is it actually began to build in opposition, because Mitt Romney failed. He failed against Obama, and the way he built his coalition, sort of expanding this theocratic framework to a wider array of denominations, also fundamentally failed to win at the electorate. And then he was one of the early ones to turn on Trumpism, MAGAism, the new form of the Republican coalition as it began to grow, which was an alliance of essentially every group that was against the urban monoculture, instead of just one or two groups that was against the urban monoculture. So it's much more focused on preventing the urban monoculture's imperialist tendencies around the school system, around messaging, around media, around art, than trying to impose our own imperialist tendencies. In many ways, it's the anti-imperialist faction, because that's the only way we can preserve multiple minority traditionalist factions. So Mitt Romney comes out, attacks this, is like, oh, we need to get back to, being reasonable and well-buttoned and everything like that. And in so doing, he made that form of Christianity kind of distasteful to the average American. The overly sober, the overly I don't push people's buttons, the overly wholesome in a way where the wholesomeness isn't offensive. Like, I think if you look at a lot of our messaging, we're wholesome, but in a way that is offensive.
It's deeply offensive to people. Yeah, and that looks weird. And Mormons are really, really good at almost overcorrecting for the weirdness of their history or religion in a way that involves them looking, to your point, like pod people. But of course, this is coming from us weirdos who are deeply uncomfortable with conformity. So I think that goes to show how conformist and how crowd friendly or normie friendly the general Mormon aesthetic is, right?
Yeah. And I think that he made that aesthetic sort of uncool on the intellectual side of the right. And as an immediate response to him, that's where you had, what was it called?
The intellectual dark web?
The intellectual dark web.
You were going to talk about dark academia, the fashion.
No. The dark academia is a style, which is cute. I like it. Yeah, I dated my girlfriend before Simone was very dark academia style.
She was. I was immediately thinking of her.
I was like, but the intellectual dark web arose in that post-Romney era. Of sort of, if we're going to like seriously engage with this, we need to be subversive, because the dominant culture no longer agrees with the form of overly concerned what other people think of them wholesomeness that Mitt Romney represented.
Interesting. Wow.
And then
he was like this catalyst that triggered a domino effect.
Well, there was a secondary catalyst, which was an alliance of, when people talk about the tech elite, they're like, okay, so who are the tech elite? Are they like the people who work at like Amazon? Are they like, no, they are people who live within tech environments. This is the 4chan diaspora, the red
the
pill
tech
diaspora.
natives. Yeah, it really shouldn't be tech elite. It should
The
be
edgy atheist diaspora, the
yeah.
Gamergate diaspora. All of these have been ruled into one alliance, which where they say elite, they mean it like PC gamer master race. They don't mean it they mean it in like a vitalistic, they're proud of who they are, they're different, you know.
Oh, so they mean, to quote the old term L337.
I don't know what that means.
Elite?
Oh, elite. Oh, okay.
Oh my God. Am I that old? I'm sorry. Yikes.
Tech elite. Okay, so
yes.
The tech elite are very non-traditional elitists, and I think this is also something that people miss out. But they think that the tech elite is like us and Elon and stuff like that, and like obviously we're figures in that, but that is our culture. The culture of Doge, like literally the apartment he's running, comes from like a meme that got popular on 4chan. Was the culture of 4chan before it turned all, what's the word they use to mean the place has a bunch of feds? Glowy.
That's the term.
Like, 4chan these days is a little glowy. Before 4chan got glowy, that culture that it embodied is the culture that a lot of us grew up within these online environments. I remember somebody was like, oh, this is like a boomer's version of 4chan in our 4chan episode. And I was like, you do understand that my generation was the one that created 4chan at the height of 4chan's cultural relevance. You might be not understanding how old 4chan culture is. And if you're still like unapologetically like a 4chaner today instead of on one of the other sites, or would say it with some qualification, you probably were not an OG 4chaner. You're a new sort of replication of that culture because it appealed to you, the culture that was fostered by people of my internet generation. And sorry, that really got me when they were like, oh, boomer understanding of, it's like, how old do you think I am, and how old do you think 4chan is? Anyway, no, but that was actually a pretty interesting to me, this conceptualization of this online counterculture as being forever young. It's not forever young. It was something that was cooked within the bowels of stuff like, if you see our video, this weird how the new right came from like the new atheist movement in a way, like the not the new atheist, I say like the counter new atheist, the original online like skeptics movement, and we sort of chart that progression, was one of the factions that ended up becoming the base of the new right. It wasn't the only one. You also got the red pillars, you also have the 4chan diaspora, you also have, you know, a lot of these groups, the diaspora that was squeezed off of Reddit. Today we think of Reddit as being an incredibly leftist place, but you know, there was the era of, you know, things like Tumblr in Action, right? Like Tumblr in Action was a big, very commonly used site for tracking what was happening within leftist culture in a negative context. Or what was the fat one that I used to always love?
Was it called Fat People Hate?
No, I don't think it was. I know that was one of them, but I'm blanking on.
I'm pretty sure it's called Fat People Hate, which I'm like, whoa, okay, we really went there.
Like I thought it was so funny to like laugh at the Haze movement.
Oh, and the Caterham tales. Classic.
And the Caterham tales were the juiciest.
Beautiful.
Anyone who hasn't read the Caterham tales, that's some internet deep lore there.
Yeah, man.
But these were, and that's also something that I think people are surprised about. They're like, wait, like Reddit burst a part of the modern right? Yeah, Reddit was the meeting place of a lot of the red pill movement. Like the red pill was a Reddit phenomenon, predominantly in its early days, where a lot of people are like, oh, why would you guys get like, people can be like, well, there were red pillars on other sites, like, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think even when the red pill had its height on Reddit, for example, they knew
it was a Reddit phenomenon in its early days.
They also knew its days were numbered on Reddit.
Yeah, so
they knew it would eventually get
meeting place of the early red pill movement was Reddit. That was where you would go if you're old enough to be like me or my wife's age, and you were in that community. That was the main place ideas were aired, was in that community, and you had sort of auxiliary conversations happening in other areas, but Reddit was the center of that culture, and that culture is what sprung out into the bromosphere, Andrew Tate, other ideas on the right. So this is one sort of an explanation of how this movement came together, but also if you want to go back to within your own culture, within your own kids and churches and everything like that, traditionalist values, like if you're like completely set on the cargo cult of the 1950s, Americana, Christian traditionalism, that's fine. We want to be allied with you. We want to be on the same team with you, but you don't have a voter base to win elections.
Mm-hmm.
You need to work with everyone who's working against the urban monoculture, or we all fail. And I'm not saying this like as an attack on people. I understand the instinct for intergroup signaling to be like, these guys are weird. This part of the movement is different and new. Jordan Peterson isn't a real Christian. John Vervanke isn't a real Christian. You know, why do we have Jews like what's his face who runs the main Jewish political activist on the right?
Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro, yes. Why do we have Jews like Ben Shapiro running huge media organizations on the right? And it's because you can't win on your own anymore. And in fact, it has become so fractionalized that the evangelicals who only spoke to evangelicals have basically disappeared from the public media environment. They've disappeared from the internet. They've disappeared from the airwaves. And you can ask, why did this happen? Where did they all go? Why is the evangelicals I hear from today, people like Redeemed Zoomer, who we've had on the show, he's not a classic evangelical. He's like a what do you call them again? The ones from, he's a form of Calvinist, Presbyterian. You know, why is it only like more understanding ones like him? And it's because they're willing to create media environments which compel outsider interaction, which is, as he mentioned in a recent video, his audience is majority Catholic, right? Like very antagonistic to his beliefs. Not like outwardly antagonistic. I just mean there's a lot of friction there. But he creates content in a way that engages that audience as well. If you look at our audience, you know, very Catholic, very Jewish, right? Like very Mormon, actually. And the iterations of the movement that say, oh, we're only going to talk to one faction have mostly fizzled out. And I think that this is a problem where if you are not within like the online influencer space within the right, you don't realize this. You know, if you're like just working at the Heritage Foundation, you don't realize how unpalatable a message like we need to kick anyone who is engaged with reproductive technology that we don't like out of the movement is to the actual base. Or, you know, another thing that they did, when actually I was like, oh my God, this would pull really bad among like the actual like red pill 4chan diaspora, is banning pornography. I was like, that was part of Project 45. And we've talked with the people at the Heritage Foundation. We're like, look, like this is why a lot of the base is against this. You know, if you look at like the online fights recently, like Tracer Butt or like the Skullgirls controversy, the left has always been on the pro-censorship side because they basically just want to punish male sexuality. And we can capture that land, but we capture that land by saying, okay, I can teach my own kids something. I can tell my own kids I wouldn't be okay with this. And I can have a very different perspective for what I am okay with tolerating within the groups that are allied with me.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, to a certain extent, I don't think there is much that, for example, organizations like Heritage Foundation can do given their donor base and the opinions of their donor base and their dependence on their jobs. So I don't blame them for holding the stances that they hold.
No.
They're welcome to hold
them. I don't feel like any antagonism. This is very different than like why I was mad at Lyman Stone. Like I was mad at Lyman Stone because I thought he was being pointlessly spiteful to new people within the movement and putting out information that I didn't think was accurate. And that is a very different form of anger to this, where I'm just like, look, I get the game you're playing. I understand your donor base. I understand what you have to signal. I am totally okay with you making these arguments publicly. The only argument that I would push against is these people can't be part of the New Right Alliance. These people can't be part of the pro-natalist movement, because it's that then we move into woke territory, and it's why the wokes failed, because they didn't allow any ideological diversity within their movement.
Yeah. And to be fair, we've buried the hatchet with Lyman Stone. We've talked. We're good now. We like him.
We've talked, and yeah, I'm totally fine as long as he doesn't attack like new people. Because look, like as people who are sort of seen as like the face of a movement, I feel like really personally hurt when people come into this movement expecting a diverse and thoughtful environment, and then they get attacked by people, either because of beliefs that they hold or their sexuality or something like that. And I'm like, that is not the movement that we're trying to cultivate here, right? Like, I want people to feel safe with ideological diversity, so long as in terms of the policy that we're all working together to implement, we remember, because it's true, we have like 98% overlap in policy goals.
Yeah, exactly.
In realistically implementable policy goals. You know, would we like to fund like genetic research in humans more? Of course.
But we can. And would they like to ban abortion? Well, they can. And would Lyman Stone love for, you know, paid family leave and free childcare? Yes, but we can't have that. No, that's not going to work. That won't pass. So like, we don't have to disagree about these things because they're not going to happen. Let's focus on the few things that actually can get passed, which is a great point to focus on.
Yeah, and I think that that's what makes this alliance work, and it's something that we should, rather than, because there's sort of this woke right idea that some people have been trying to push, and while I understand the sentiment behind it, I think a better way to align with this stuff is, look, you want to be more extreme than me on some issues. We're not the left. I'm not going to read you out of the room because you tell me something. I want to engage in constructive debate around like what is actually going to come as a result.
And we love those debates. They're really good debates. We love debating erotic material on the internet and the, you know, legality when life begins of abortion with Heritage Foundation team members.
Which we do.
That is fun. And we love it and we all enjoy it. Like
I've changed my perspective on issues.
Yes. Yeah. It helps us get to a more nuanced perspective. Like all of these things are positive. And so it's good to debate, but it's also really good to focus on the stuff that we actually can address because we pretty much all agree on those things.
Yeah, and so I think that within the New Right Alliance or the Tech Right Alliance, this continues to work only insofar as we do not become gatekeepers. There's a big difference between disagreeing with people and attempting to gatekeep support for our combined cause. And where I would say, even within this logical framework, gatekeeping makes sense, is gatekeeping around issues that you can actually win with on your own. Right? And gatekeeping around things like intergenerational improvement of Americans is not something you could, like, she was like, they don't want more Americans, they want better Americans. And I'm like, of course we want, do you not want better Americans? Like, our end state is Captain America. That's what we're striving for. You know, we're striving for the when people look at us and they're like, oh, this is like weird, you know, transhumanist nonsense, right? Where it's like they want to create some sort of like post-gender, the weirdo is like blue hair.
But they dress up their 5-year-old son in a Captain America Halloween costume, so whatever.
You know, but the point I'm making is that if Elon Musk is going to represent, you know, fundamentally like the Tony Stark of this timeline, we aim to represent with our countercultural wholesomeness the Captain America of this timeline. We aim to represent, yes, we can make better Americans, and that they don't represent a subversion of American values, but a fulfillment of everything America has ever stood for, which is pushing humanity to its absolute limits and then past them, to landing on the moon, to, you know, that is what America, to the atomic bomb project, to the, like, America has always been about over the top boundary pushing science. And I think if we as a movement are like, no, we needed to go back to like a pre-AI era and a pre-human, you know, augmentation era and I want to protect the Amish's right to be that way. And I want to protect your culture.
Yeah, because if we're not the ones to do it, no one's going to protect the right of the Amish to not be a part of some dystopian AI world, and it's not going to be America run, and we can't afford that.
Don't attack the one like pro-technology group
Yeah.
that core ideological mission is to protect you in a future where other groups will have this technology.
Yeah.
The right to be a granola human is right now something that I think a lot of people take for granted, but they don't take into account the long term of what's going to happen if they create an environment where the granola humans become existentially hostile to the non-granola humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you like my term there, granola human? Do you understand what I mean when I say it? Like the crunchy granola moms?
That's, yeah. When people hear the term granola mom or crunchy mom, it's all the same thing. I guess almond mom is a little different, but yeah, they get it.
We don't push this stuff in the way that some technologists do for like no reason. We push at it to defeat those who would impose their culture on us. And today that might be wokeness, which, you know, we've fought against with our school system. You can check out Parasia.io is absolutely amazing now. I really would just unmitigatedly be like, this is in most ways better than, I'd say, at least 50% of the colleges in the United States, if not 75% of the colleges in the United States. And soon, I think it will be better unapologetically to all the colleges in the United States. Like, that's where we are with the ways that we have been adapting AI to break the chokehold that the urban monoculture has on our youth. And we've made this something that you can edit, whatever your religious traditions are, whether you're a conservative Mormon or an evangelical or an Orthodox Jew, you can just delete nodes and we can help you with that, right? Like, we have created a system that is designed to help protect not just our values, but yours. And I think that that's where the new right is people with diverse values saying, I'm not here to protect just my values. I'm here to protect your values, so long as you're not pushing those values on me.
Which I think is closer to what the founding fathers wanted.
Oh, absolutely. The founding fathers, if you look at early America, I mean, the different colonies were culturally radically different from each other. And all of the initial debates within getting them all to come together in one country was like, okay, but we all hate each other, right? Okay, we all hate each other, but we'll work better to protect all of our independent ways of life working together. And I really like that analogy for the new right. The new right is the founding fathers against the British. It is a bunch of radically different cultural experiments. And I might think, you know, what you are doing in the Deep South or over in, you know, Quaker Philadelphia is like a bit fruity, but like, so long as you don't impose your values legalistically on me in the backwoods, like, we can work together. And I think that, and not just we can work together, we can be proud to work together and build a wider vision of vitalism that works. And a lot of people have been like, well, then what is that? Like, is the new right just reactive to the left? And it's like, no, it's absolutely not. It has very clear goals, which is to, one, preserve the multitude of conservative traditions that make up the American tapestry, whether that's traditional, you know, Catholic Irish, or traditional Deep South Baptist, or traditional Orthodox Jews, or the always moving forwards form of Puritan that we represent, where like the founding father deists would like scratch up and be like, okay, let's try to rethink this, let's try to rethink that. Those are all classical strains of American thought that worked together in the past and can continue to work together to create a bright future for us. So that's one thing, is we work together against the urban monoculture, but it is preserving our cultural autonomy, which is first and foremost on the social front. And then on the economic front, it's about whatever works. You know, like Trump's American Academy, which is meant to create, like, socialize the American educational system to destroy the college system as it exists right now. That's very right. That's very new right. It's very socialist as well. You know, JD Vance's like minimum wage stuff, like our stuff around like, hey, UBI might be necessary in an age of AI. The Doge is, hey, we need to destroy these inefficient government departments that are just burning cash right now, or spending it on, you know, extending the urban monoculture's reach. This is something that we can just so all universally agree with. Like, why are we splitting hairs when there's so much left to be done in the areas which we agree?
Does something like this coalition of ideologically very different parties aligning in the name of sovereignty exist elsewhere? Like, is this what the far right people in Germany are fighting for, or is this just not something we really see anywhere else?
I think that this is something that if the far right of the AFD and Nigel Farage's party in the UK are going to survive, they are going to need to learn from this form of quote unquote far right ideology. And I think they're doing it to an extent, but it is articulating that we are a diverse set of conservative cultural traditions, where conservative is mostly just how different we are from the mainstream culture.
Yeah.
And we all are working together to preserve human flourishing in the future and to preserve the flourishing of our own nation states, which we have a degree of patriotism for. But that patriotism is going to look very different. One person said to me, I was talking to like a leftist reporter, I was on like ABC or something recently, and they were like, well, like, why are you trying to, or they said, well, certainly you wouldn't side with like the nationalists, right? And I was like, why wouldn't I side with the nationalists? Why is it such a crime to have pride in who you are and your ancestors? But in America, nationalism, if you go back to the time of the founding fathers, is intrinsically a collection of diverse groups. And we don't even not represent one of those groups. Like, anyone who knows the stories of the founding fathers knows that they were Christian, a number of them, but they were like weird Christians. A lot of them were as well. And us being weird Christians doesn't make us not like part of the team that made up the founding coalition of this country. And we want to recreate a team like that so we can fight and have a shot at fighting those who would oppose us. We want to create the party of Captain America, not the party of the pearl clutcher. The left is the party of the pearl clutcher, not us.
Well, it's so odd to me that we've allowed political baggage of some past movements to make pride in something that you've built and contributed to a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you are proud to pay taxes and you're proud of what your country stands for and fights for, then why would you not be nationalistic? Although I do understand that there's plenty of people who don't like their country, but then, I don't know, get out like, or find something better, because it's really, I think we're doing pretty well in a large scheme of things. I was just listening to a very, very, very long analysis of the weird corruption and cult associations / shaman associations of past Korean prime ministers. And I'm just thinking like, wow, man, we're doing all right. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the US, we're doing really strong. And we just want to make sure that we don't take too much like over our handle because we're like, okay, we're on the winning side now, and accidentally crash this alliance over things that are irrelevant from the perspective of policy that we can actually get past.
Absolutely.
And I also, I point out, historically speaking, the idea of the American versus the, for example, Nazi super soldier has always been an idea of the American chooses, their culture chooses to undergo this. This is them, this is their family. Whereas with Nazis, it's always forced upon some poor, unsuspecting test subject who's from, a differential cultural group. And I think in America, like in other countries, in China, they might not be able to get their super soldiers without forcing people. So that becomes culturally normal. But within America, we have enough internal diversity that you have weird groups like us that are going to engage with that stuff and do want to protect you. And I think that should be seen as a blessing rather than something that you want to stamp out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I agree, but I'm also way too aligned with you for steel manning some other view. I'm myopically too much in your camp. So I just hope this keeps up and that we don't let this movement become fractured, because that is 100% what the left is trying to do, as is shown in countless media stories of,
oh, President Elon.
Well, that plus these attempts to, for example, characterize the pernatalist movement as deeply ideologically divided, when in the end, yeah, we have raucous debates, but we have those debates with smiles on our faces and in the same room. We go to each other's events.
Yeah, and it's very much like, when I debate the Heritage Foundation people over stuff like, when does life begin, for example, it's not like the left where they hold this for like dogmatic and insane reasons. And it's really clear that they're just trying to look like good people. They don't actually care about what's true. They clearly believe what they're saying, which is why I don't hold it against them. It reminds me of when somebody was like, early was one of the people we work with, and they're like, oh, this guy is homophobic, like you shouldn't work with him. And I thought that about him for a while, and then I looked it up and I was like, wait, he's just a Mormon. Like, are you saying like I can't be friends with a Mormon? Like, that's just religious discrimination, right? Like, he doesn't have these beliefs because he hates gay people. He has these beliefs because of his religion. Like, and it's the same with these groups at like the Heritage Foundation. They have these beliefs where I think, if you talk somebody out of IVF, you functionally killed their kids, right? Like, it's a very big deal to me because those are kids that would have existed had you not done that. And this is something that they do regularly within their cultural groups. And then they can be like, well, how do you have no animosity about that? And it goes, because I don't believe they're doing it with a single ounce of malice. I think they 1,000% believe everything they're saying. And I think the movement works because they know, like when I look at my kids and I'm like, why am I pro IVF? Because I hug my kids every day. Right? Like, and in a world where that's not there, those kids don't exist. Yeah. And you can say, well, yeah, I didn't kill them technically speaking. And it's
like, let's be clear. There's just no way that Malcolm and Ira could have had kids without IVF. So
no way. She does not have periods.
Not just that, like we tried everything leading up to that, like forcing the periods, forcing more ovulation, forcing like measuring everything, working with an IVF clinic on every step of none of it worked. And then we got a diagnosis, and like there's just also other complications anatomically with me that would make it impossible for me.
Our kids do not exist in a no IVF world. And that makes it really hard for me to support that world when you love your kids as much as you love your kids, right? Like, people love their kids, right? And the thought that those kids wouldn't exist is horrifying to me. So obviously I'm ideologically very invested in this, but not so invested that I can't see where they're coming from, and I can't see the arguments that they're making. And the way I convince them is with logic, not with dogmatism or shrieking or exclusion.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Anyway, love you to death, Simone.
I love you too. And I love that you're a big tent kind of guy. I'm so excited for this, though. Anytime someone mentions Mitt Romney, I'm like, this is the best. Let's do it. Let's talk. I'm so disappointed by what could have been.
That was during the Obama era. No way he was going to win.
I know. You can't win against Obama. And I was so excited when Obama won. Everyone was.
And this is where
Mitt was probably excited when Obama won.
This is where you get the craziness of, supposedly, if you believe the posted numbers, that Biden beat Obama by 16 percentage points, which is just comical in terms of turnout. But we won't go into that because that's too spicy a topic. Okay.
Wait, why do you need golden pants?
Because if you give me I love you, so if you trade me golden pants, then I'll get anything you want. Even golden pants and golden shirts and golden glasses.
But if you give me golden pants, will you have golden pants?
Yeah, well, I can also, get you, infinity dollars when I become an adult if you give me those golden pants.
But how will having golden pants give you infinity dollars?
No, I can just make it when I become an adult.
Oh, so you'll pay me back later.
Yeah, when I go on the cruise, because sometimes when I become an adult, then I can go on a cruise to tell them buy you golden glasses if you trade me infinity dollars.
And I don't have infinity dollars.
Oh, you can make some. Well, you can tell my dad to make some. Comment down below if you like me, because I'll tell you my whole name. I keep it for a secret for years, and I'll tell you now. Don't tell anybody. If you do, I'm not like and subscribe to your channel. Or if you don't and you do like and subscribe, then like and subscribe to the channel. So you're so
Okay, so what if someone just liked and subscribed? Are you going to tell them your full name?
Yeah, I'll tell you my full name now. My whole name. Arcadian George Cohen's. I was keeping my first name and middle name a secret for you.
Thanks, buddy. I love you.
Love you too. Hey, guess what, subscribers? If you like us, subscribe. Then we'll try buying you golden. So when you like and subscribe to the channel and comment down below what you like, then we'll give you it. If you like that,
Wow.
we'll give you it when I become an adult because I'm already a kid. I'm 5 years old. I don't have that much money. I just have my collection. And do you see some cars and a box? And